The young man walked toward an imposing mansion. He stopped in front of a closed door. He was called by the name Eleanor-sama. Slowly, he opened the door, softly announcing that he was coming in. Suddenly, she appeared before him. Her arms wrapped around him tightly, as if afraid of losing him. With sudden impact, she demanded to know where he had been. He simply answered that he was Arx. In his mind, he remembered that he had reincarnated as a side character in an OTEM game, and unexpectedly, the Yandere villainess had fallen in love with him. The setting belonged to the Kingdom of Celestia, the stage of a famous OTEM game that had gained popularity in Japan for its many possible endings. Among all the characters, Eleanor was known for her cruel acts and her reputation as the villainess. In the middle of all this was him, Arx Lefort, a young man who in none of the story's routes was even mentioned by name. In other words, he was just a background extra. For him, that was never a problem. He was only a background character, nothing more. He barely had memories of his previous life. The basic rule of reincarnation in games was to use past knowledge to win, but with him it was different. Somehow, he was intelligent, strong, and even drew the attention of some girls without making much effort. What he clearly remembered was that he had lived in a country called Japan. For some reason, his memory was limited only to this game. In that current world, he had no family or relatives. He simply lived peacefully in the orphanage that had taken him in. While observing his quiet life, he silently questioned the reason for being reincarnated there. He reflected that even as just a background character, he could still find a great opportunity. He imagined that if he were the protagonist, he could use incredible magic or even live the school life alongside the other characters. He decided that for now, he would just enjoy that world the way it was. With determination, he trained by wielding a wooden sword. With a decisive strike, he knocked his opponent to the ground. The announcement of victory echoed, and everyone recognized Arx as the winner. The defeated opponent admitted his strength and surrendered. The crowd around reacted in astonishment. They said he had defeated all the adults of the village. They called him amazing and marveled at his strength. A child ran up to him, calling him Arx-nichan. The boy asked if by training he could become as strong as him. Arx answered with a smile and confirmed that he could. But in silence, he thought that he had only trained out of boredom, since there were no online games in that world. That was why he had gotten so strong. He laughed at himself, concluding that this strength only served to drive away monsters near the village. It would never be enough to become a knight. The head of the orphanage approached and congratulated him. Arx accepted the applause with humility. The man said that he would become a great knight in the future. Arx denied it, saying it was impossible for someone ordinary like him to reach such a position. But the director insisted. He said that someone as wise and strong as him could certainly become one. Never imagining that the small boy he once was would grow so remarkable. The director smiled calmly, saying that he had a favor to ask. Arx looked surprised, saying what kind of favor it was. Soon after, the young man was taken to a mansion. Sitting on an elegant sofa, his heart raced, nervous about the luxurious setting. He whispered to the director that he felt out of place there. The director simply replied that there was someone who really wanted to see him. The door slowly opened. An imposing man entered the hall. He introduced himself as Adalbert Ancinous, the count responsible for ruling that region. Arx was shocked to hear that it was a count.
The noble said he had heard about Arx's achievements. He stated that there was a very important favor he wished to ask. The director beside him added that, despite some shortcomings, Arx was an extremely capable child. Arx wondered why someone of such high authority would speak to him directly. Then the count fixed his gaze on him and made the request. He asked if Arx would agree to be his daughter's friend. Arx froze in shock, trying to understand if he had heard correctly. He began questioning the reason for such a strange request. Could it be that the count's daughter had an illness? Or perhaps a terrible personality, difficult to handle? Why would someone choose an orphan of all people to be her friend? Arx realized something odd about the Ancinous family name. The count then called for his daughter to enter. The door opened, and a girl with an intense gaze appeared. She introduced herself in a calm voice. Her name was Eleanor Ancinous. Arx was left speechless, stunned by the revelation. He was in shock at hearing the girl's name, Eleanor Ancinous. In his mind, he remembered that she was the villainess who tormented the protagonist of the game purely out of malice. In the story, she laid curses and traps to obstruct the hero. He recalled that Eleanor was the root of all evil and the final boss. He questioned why they wanted him to be friends with someone like her. The Count asked that they talk for a while. He said he believed the two of them would become good friends. They walked out into the mansion's garden. The Count was right. The garden truly never lost its charm. Arx, however, felt uncomfortable in such a strange situation. Someone remarked that Ellen was the same age as him, and also very cute. He reflected, admitting to himself that it was true. He thought no child could truly be that cold. His eyes watched her in silence. He had never seen such a beautiful girl, with black hair and black eyes. Even distant and expressionless, she seemed to shine like a main character. Arx couldn't help but feel captivated. Suddenly, he asked if something was wrong. She lowered her gaze, her face shadowed. Eleanor took a few steps back, hesitating. Arx called out to her respectfully, worried that she wasn't feeling well. He offered to walk her back to the mansion. Eleanor lifted her eyes and spoke in a cold voice. She said she already knew the truth. She believed he did not want to be her friend. Arx was stunned, not understanding her reaction. Eleanor, with a serious look, said she understood. She insisted that he didn't want to get close to someone cursed like her. Arx tried to deny it, but barely managed to speak. She went on saying it was fine. She revealed there was no need to hide it because everyone had always thought the same. Her eyes dropped, heavy with sadness. Memories surfaced, people pointing at her, whispering that she was exactly as the rumors claimed. They said she brought misfortune to anyone nearby because they said she had no light in her eyes. They said she could only be a cursed child. They commented on her black hair and black eyes, calling them frightening. Some even tried to approach her, only because she was a noble's daughter. But in the end, they all rejected her. She remembered always receiving looks filled with hatred. Once, when her power manifested, she terrified those around her. They thought they would be killed by her. From that moment on, no one spoke to her again. Eleanor walked slowly through the garden. She said she had already grown used to it. She believed that was the natural reaction people should have toward her. Arx watched in silence, astonished, as she approached the flowers. With a single touch, the roses withered and lost their color before his eyes. Shock overtook him.
A strange energy struck him, making him tremble. Arx was in shock, unable to believe what he was seeing. He recognized that this was Eleanor's power, a magic unlike anything he had ever witnessed before. She raised her hand, showing him what was happening. She told him to look and see for himself. Everything she touched lost its color, withered, and died. Not only plants, but people as well. Arx called her name with seriousness. Eleanor gave a bitter smile. She said that now he understood because she was a cursed child. Arx thought to himself that he had never imagined she had suffered so much. If that was the reason for her isolation, then perhaps, if he helped her now, he could change her fate. He remembered the Count's request, to be his daughter's friend. He reflected that he had never understood why he had been reincarnated there. But in that moment, he felt he had found a reason. He decided he would put the story back on track. He would get closer to her, seek the happy ending of that world, and avoid the bad route. A future where no one ended up unhappy, including Eleanor. He called her name firmly. He said he saw nothing frightening in her, no strange appearance or reason for fear. To him, she was incredibly beautiful. Eleanor blushed, surprised by his words. Her eyes trembled, unable to hide her emotion. She admitted that
Perhaps there was a possibility her power could hurt someone. But Arx replied that there was another way to use that gift. He said that even if she ended up hurting someone, he would find a way to handle it. He extended his hand to her, determination in his eyes. He promised he would stay by her side. He promised to give a different meaning to the power everyone called a curse. He asked her to become his friend. But voices echoed in her memory. They called her a demon, said her curse would spread. They accused her of being a filthy crow. She remembered when she was just a child. Terrified, she cried out for her mother in despair. The figure of her mother appeared before her. Eleanor called to her, hopeful, but the woman only told her not to look at her with those eyes. Little Eleanor could hardly breathe. Soon tears streamed down her face. She apologized over and over. She begged forgiveness for existing, even begged forgiveness for having been born. Suddenly she opened her eyes in fright. Arx was calling her with concern. He realized she had a terrible nightmare. Arx explained that they had been talking in her room and she had fallen asleep from exhaustion. Arx smiled and said maybe that was why she had such a nightmare. Eleanor looked at him in silence, with tears welling in her eyes. Arx was surprised by her expression. Suddenly she began to cry, hiding her face in her hands. Arx panicked, not knowing what to do. He gently touched her shoulders. Soon he embraced her, trying to calm her. He caressed her back softly while she trembled in tears. Arx thought that, in truth, she had already achieved this. She asked him to be her friend. Eleanor, embarrassed, said that if anyone stayed with her, they would only end up unhappy. But Arx replied that it wasn't true. He said that being with her would make him happy. She insisted that she might end up hurting him too, but he answered that no one lives without hurting someone at some point in life. Eleanor lowered her head and said he would be better off with someone else. Arx held her hand firmly and called her name. He said he didn't want anyone else. He declared that he only wanted to be by her side. The two looked at each other with sincerity. She asked him to take care of her.
Arx watched Eleanor, who lowered her head and apologized, but he gave a warm smile and told her not to apologize. He assured her that his chest would always be there for her. Eleanor let out a soft laugh, saying that Arx really was kind. He replied naturally, saying he was only doing what any friend would do. Still uncertain, she confessed that she had never had anyone she could call an ally, let alone a friend. She wondered if she could ever measure up to someone like Arx. He reassured her, saying there was nothing wrong. Sitting together, he explained that friendship could take many forms. He said he was simply doing what he thought was right. He added that if she made more friends, in time she would learn how to handle it. He reminded her that communication required practice and repetition. That was why he suggested they take things slowly. Eleanor smiled, agreeing. Arx then added that, after all, life was much longer than they imagined. A few weeks passed since then. Eleanor now smiled brightly, showing him flowers she had made bloom with magic. She called out to Arx excitedly, asking if he wanted to eat sweets and commenting on how beautiful the stars looked that night. Arx was frozen by the change. He thought this transformation was far too great, but even so, he found it all adorable. Eleanor noticed he wasn't paying attention and glared at him with an annoyed look. She asked if he was listening. He answered with a smile, saying he had just gotten lost in thought. She asked if there was anything more important than her words. Arx hurriedly denied it. He said that for him, nothing was more important than her. With a sincere look, he declared that there was nothing above her. Eleanor was surprised, though she tried to hide her smile. He then began bragging, saying that on top of everything, he was quite attractive. The scene grew even more comical when he admired himself in the reflection. Eleanor pressed him, insisting he say his preferences quickly. Arx tried to think of his answer about clothes, but then Count Adalbert entered the room. He called Arx by name and asked for a moment with him. The Count excused himself and said he needed to speak with him for a while. She averted her gaze and said she didn't mind, remarking that Arx had been distracted anyway. Before leaving, Arx approached Eleanor. He called her name gently and told her that any outfit would look beautiful on her. She blushed at the unexpected words. Arx then waved as he was led into the hall by the Count. There, Adalbert revealed that the request he had made earlier had been approved. Starting the following week, Arx would become part of the Ancinous family. He thanked him enthusiastically. The Count, however, questioned if he truly agreed, since he could have offered him another place to stay. He added that this way it helped him avoid traveling back and forth, and also gave him work. Arx completed the thought, saying he would never use Adalbert's authority for his own gain. The Count was surprised, admiring his maturity for someone only 7 years old. Arx then smiled and said that was the very reason he had been chosen as Eleanor's friend. Arx ended the conversation with the Count promising to do his best. Before leaving, he reflected that there was still something important he wanted to do. In the corridor, he found Eleanor clearly upset. He accused him of taking too long speaking with her father while she had been waiting anxiously. He apologized formally and presented himself before her. He declared that from that moment on, he would serve as her attendant. The scene then shifted to the mansion's great hall. Servants hurried back and forth with preparations for the event, exchanging information and solving problems in a rush. Time moved on. 3 years had passed since Arx had become a servant in that house. Eleanor was now about to turn 10 years old.
This world celebrates milestone ages, always in multiples of 10 with great luxury. He described how everyone was busy with preparations for the feast. Arx, seated, remarked that it would be his first time attending a noble's party. A maid announced that the hall's preparations were complete. A young girl named Nanai thanked Arx for his work, noting that he seemed tired. He agreed that the day before such events was always hectic. She smiled gently and said that thanks to him, they were fully ready for the following day. Arx replied that it was good to hear. As he looked at the table, Arx thought to himself, for some reason, that responsibility had fallen on him. Despite being only 10 years old, he was now supervising the entire feast. Other servants rushed to him, asking for help and making decisions. He wondered how things had come to this point. He thought he'd only given a few obvious suggestions based on his previous life, but suddenly he was being treated as a leader. One of the maids praised his attitude. She said that beyond having good ideas, he also took the initiative to act on his own. Arx reflected that none of this was for himself. He only wanted the feast to be perfect for Eleanor. He wanted to see her smile shine, and that was why he gave his all. For him, a little fatigue was nothing. He used his magic, creating stones and helping with the preparations. Arx announced he would go train, gripping his weapon firmly. He struck a heavy blow through the air, determined. He activated healing magic, revitalizing his tired body. With renewed energy, he smiled, saying that he would give his best. Before taking his leave, he cheered up even more and said he looked forward to seeing them tomorrow. In the dark garden, he continued training with determination. Exhausted, he decided that was enough for today. Suddenly, he heard his name being called. Startled, he turned and found Eleanor. She revealed she had been there for some time, watching him. Surprised, Arx nervously apologized, saying he hadn't even noticed her presence. He scolded her, saying that in doing so, she might catch a cold. Eleanor, however, smiled softly and said that even so, he should warm her. Arx hesitated, thinking she could easily use magic to warm herself, but she insisted, saying that he had been far too busy and hardly came to see her anymore.
Her face flushed, declares that he belongs to her, but quickly corrects herself, asking if he shouldn't always be by her side since he's her servant. Arx apologizes, explaining that he would love to, but he's simply too busy. He clarifies that all his effort is for the following day, so they can give her a magnificent celebration. Understanding says that if that's the case, there's nothing to be done. After all, tomorrow is an important day. She suggests they head back because it's cold and suddenly asks if Arx ever feels lonely. Surprised by the question, he replies that not at all, since and all the other servants have been very kind to him. With an irritated expression, she begins to walk away, stomping her feet, telling him to take good care of everything the next day, leaving Arx confused about what he did wrong. On the day of the party, the mansion's grand hall shines brilliantly with the event's decorations. Count thanks the guests for coming and then calls for Arx. With a stern look, he orders him to eliminate all pests who might try to approach her, and Arx replies with a quick, "Yes, yes." Arx comments to another servant that he feels he's seen those two people somewhere before, suddenly turning with a look of panic. He peers down the stairs, wondering if they noticed him staring, and then realizes they've already left. The host's voice echoes through the hall, inviting everyone to welcome the star of the day and to marvel at her radiant presence. She descends the stairs, dazzling in her party dress, exuding confidence and beauty. Arx is left speechless as he sees her walking beside another woman, completely shocked by her appearance. He thinks to himself that looks incredible and that it's amazing how much a child can grow in just 3 years. Whispers his name, and Arx regrets not being able to stay by her side, since he's in charge of overseeing everything that day. He rushes to San in the corridor, asking what happened and why she isn't guarding. The maid hesitates to answer, saying only well about that, leaving Arx even more confused. Sitting on an ornate chair beside, he wonders, exasperated, how the situation ended up like this. Notices that he looks pale and asks if he's okay, while Arx feels everyone's eyes piercing through him, wondering who he is. Visibly stressed, he asks whose fault she thinks it is, and the young woman pouts in response. She complains that Arx is supposed to be her attendant but is never by her side, while he reflects that there's no need for a mere servant to sit next to the guest of honor. The young man thanks her kindness but worries about the guests, to which retorts firmly that Arx is not just any servant. With a determined look, she declares that he should be celebrated as well, leaving Arx surprised by the idea. The girl reminds him that he's about the same age as her, yet no one is celebrating his birthday. Arx reflects that since he doesn't even know his exact date of birth, no one has ever truly celebrated his birthday, something a nearby guest comments on. He realizes that's what she meant, and that's why she made him sit beside her as a guest of honor, thinking how beautiful her heart is. Arx reflects on how the girl who used to be so pessimistic has grown so much, concluding that there's no way she could ever become the final boss. Blushing lightly, he says it's an honor, but that the simple fact she's celebrating for him is already more than enough to make him happy. Stammers, completely blushing, asking him to stay with her later, while Arx says he just wants to make sure the party is perfect for her sake. The young man remembers the 2 youths who disappeared earlier, anxiously hoping nothing happens. From afar, a blonde-haired boy watches them with a faint smile on his face. He approaches, addressing as the daughter of Count, and invites her to dance. Arx stares at him, and as a game profile flashes in his mind, he suddenly remembers his face as. The boy then introduces himself as Razor, the son of Viscount. Arx realizes he only recognized him now because he's much younger than when the game's story begins. He recalls Razor's foul mouth and arrogant attitude, but also that his loyalty to the protagonist made him popular precisely because of that contrast. The boy presses, asking if she didn't hear him, and Arx is shocked to realize he's one of the capture targets from the Kingdom of. She repeats his words, questioning whether she should dance with him, then seems to make up her mind, saying that she understands. Coldly refuses the invitation, to Razor's shock and outrage, as he demands to know why. The young noble shouts furiously, asking how she dares, but the girl simply replies that she has no desire whatsoever to dance with him. Arx steps between them, blocking Razor's path with a swift motion. The noble boy explodes with anger, questioning how a mere servant dares to oppose him, but the attendant calmly introduces himself as Arx, servant of. He firmly states that it is his duty to protect, and that he is only fulfilling it, which makes Razor react with disgust. The Viscount's companion accuses him of violence and urges him to calm down, warning that causing a scene will tarnish his family's name, but Razor defends himself by saying he merely invited her to dance. The young man continues, worried that if the Viscount's son harms a high-ranking noblewoman or her servant, it will become a serious problem. Arx watches the scene, thinking that although Razor isn't stupid, he's still childish, while his friend promises not to tell the head of the family if he backs down now. With a smug grin, Razor agrees to relent and grabs Arx's hand, surprising him with the gesture. The next instant, the young noble hurls him backward with astonishing strength, leaving him completely stunned. Razor shouts about how he dares to humiliate him, while Arx, lying on the floor, thinks about how troublesome a noble's pride can be. He reaches out his hand toward Razor's companion and utters the words, "Sleep." The young man instantly falls asleep, collapsing onto Arx's shoulder. Holding the unconscious boy, Arx asks San to call Master and she agrees, frightened. Runs toward him in concern, but he smiles and asks if she's hurt. She gently touches his face, telling him to stop worrying about her and think of himself first. The young woman points out that his stomach is swollen, but Arx insists it's nothing serious. Smiles in relief, saying she's glad he's okay. Later, as he serves drinks, another guest asks if everything is all right under her sad gaze. In a private room of the mansion, the atmosphere turns tense. Razor's older brother bows deeply, apologizing and lamenting that his relative has already caused such a serious problem. Arx reacts in shock at seeing him prostrate himself, stammering that it's all right. He asks Caesar to raise his head, recognizing him as Caesar, another of the capture targets. Caesar, a prince-like character with courteous manners, offers a sincere apology, admitting that having an impulsive younger brother is truly troublesome. He explains that because his younger brother was spoiled, he developed the habit of always getting whatever he wants. Arx thinks to himself that his behavior is like that of an elementary school kid, but quickly corrects himself, remembering that he actually is that age. Caesar continues, saying that everything happened because someone told Razor that if he was interested in a girl, he should invite her out. Looking at the sleeping boy, the attendant asks what will happen to Razor now. The older brother replies that, although it depends on Count's decision, at the very least, he probably won't be able to avoid exile. Arx clears his throat, suddenly motivated after hearing a word that usually only exists in fantasy stories. Arx reflects that, although only 10 years old, in this world one is already considered an adult, and in a way that makes sense. The realization that the capture target, Viscount Razor, has disappeared makes him wonder if the world is beginning to diverge from the main storyline of the game. He hopes that because of this, fate might also change. Approaches, calling his name, and asks if he's okay, noting that he took a while. Arx reassures her with a smile, saying he's really fine and that the delay was because he was waiting for an apology, since there were witnesses. He then apologizes too, regretting that he ended up ruining her precious birthday party. She reacts indignantly, asking why they're the ones apologizing when the culprit is that arrogant thug. The young lady admits, however, that she was too, and should have been able to avoid the situation. Arx laments, thinking that if he had noticed earlier or checked the guest list more carefully, he might have been able to get rid of him. With a sad expression, simply calls his name. She gently holds his face between her hands, leaving Arx completely taken aback by her touch.